Thank you, Renee. All right, we will start now. Thank you for joining us today. We carry on with the series of online events that constitute the Global Shelter Cluster meeting in 2021. I would, as Renee just mentioned, we will be recording the session for those, well, for our own reporting purposes, but also for those who cannot join, they can look at it later on. Richard, your camera, Richard Laff, welcome and good to see you here. Your camera is on, but we can only see our red stuff, so please turn it off. Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, we will have two sessions in the Global Shelter Cluster meeting that provide updates on the currently active working groups and communities of practice. One is today and the other one is tomorrow. Today, we will be hearing from progress and future plans of the Disability Inclusion Working Group, the Self-Recovery, formerly known as Promoting Safer Building Working Group, the Non-Food Items Community of Practice. It used to be a working group, but now it has evolved into a community of practice. We'll hear about it later on. The Diaspora Engagement Working Group and the Environment and Information Management Communities of Practice. You have links to all of this in the website. Just a quick reminder that the working groups are established by the Strategic Advisory Group based on the priorities, usually a shelter cluster partnered together with a member of the SAC puts forward an activity proposal for endorsement by the SAC where specific gap or output or product once they consider should be developed in support of shelter coordination and shelter response programming. And these working groups are time-bound and they are output-oriented. The communities of practice, on the contrary, they are open-ended and they just bring together practitioners on core cluster coordination issues. And it's a forum for exchange, a forum for learning on issues that are constantly part of our day-to-day work. So without further ado, I think I'll hand over to the Disability Inclusion Working Group. And just as you present, for those who are going to present, just tell me next slide so I can move on to the next slide. Thank you very much. Feel free to pose questions. You will have 10 minutes maximum. And I've seen some of the presentations are rather long, so you're going to have to really compress it. And please do not exceed your 10 minutes because then you will be, not 10 minutes, sorry, 15 minutes each, 15 minutes each. You will be taking time away from others. All right, Leanne, over to you for the Disability Inclusion Working Group.
Thanks a lot, Pablo, and good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everyone. Thanks for joining us for this session. I will hopefully only talk for about 10 minutes, so then we might have a few minutes at the end to be able to ask a few questions for people who are interested in knowing a bit more about the working group, but also any input that you've got to the working group itself. So just quickly before we start off properly, I guess I just wanted to give a bit of a background to the working group. For those who aren't aware, the Disability Inclusion Working Group was set up in 2018, and it was to contribute to a more systematic disability inclusive approach to shelter and settlements programming. We really saw this as a big gap in the sector. And as Pablo said, you know, these working groups are set up to kind of address some of those gaps. When we set up the working group, we identified a number of key activities that we wanted to complete to try and address those gaps. First of those was to understand a bit more about the reality of disability inclusion, shelter and settlements programming, what's actually happening in the field and what people are struggling with, where they need support. So we started off doing a baseline mapping of the sector in 2019, which I think if you've been to some of the previous shelter cluster meetings, you might have heard a bit about that. And we're also continuing to supplement this kind of broader understanding of what's happening in the sector with a few target investigations at field level, which I'll talk about a little bit shortly in terms of what we've been doing lately. One of the other activities, the second one, was the working group is acting as a forum to bring organisations and actors together to share good practice. which we are continuing to do through regular working group meetings and discussions. So if you'd like to contribute to those, we'd love to have you part of the working group as well. The third thing that we had put on our aims of how we were going to address some of these gaps was by testing and reviewing some of the efficacy of inclusive guidance within the sector. And in particular, some people might be aware of a guidance called the All Under One Roof. It's Disability Inclusive Shelter and Settlements and Emergencies Guidelines. And I'll talk a bit more about that in terms of what we've been doing recently, and also ask for some feedback and input from people who are aware of those guidelines. So that's one thing we've been progressing with. As we go forward, the last two items on this list are basically things that we will be getting to. So after we have been undertaking some of these other activities, we'll be trying to disseminate both global shelter cluster tools and standards for use by cluster members, for organisations with persons with disabilities and other actors, to make sure that you have support in terms of inclusive programming. Oh, thanks, Ella. Finally, yeah, once all these other activities are completed, the idea really is to plan for inclusive shelter support in emergency operations. So what that might look like will become apparent as we're working through this. So that's one of those things that we would love to get your input on. But we will continue also to contribute to wider activities within disability inclusion and within the humanitarian sector in general. So that includes contributing to the disability reference group through regular inputs and coordination. Next slide, please, Pablo. So as I mentioned, in the last year, since the last GSC meeting at least anyway, we've been building on the baseline mapping by supporting some in-depth case studies in different contexts. In Nigeria, IOM has been doing some really interesting work looking at disability inclusion in camps and camp-like settings. Now, they've been looking at a variety of shelter typologies, trying to understand if and how we can implement low-cost, sustainable improvements to either reduce barriers for persons with disabilities or just generally improve quality of life in these settings for persons with disabilities. So there has been a long assessment phase looking at the interrelation between people and the shelter and settlements, which is also inclusive of caregivers and families, which is coming up a lot in our conversations. And we're also looking at how people might have already adapted to their surroundings or mitigated barriers themselves, and looking to identify ways that the shelter team might be able to then support simple, localized, adaptable solutions. So that's what that team has been up to. So for more information on it, we can put you in touch with the IOM Nigeria team, but that project is ongoing. But we'll also be sharing, I guess, some of the lessons from this project back to the working group and beyond as it keeps going. The other in detail investigation is happening in Cox's Bazar, and that's really looking at how the inclusion of persons with disabilities has been undertaken within the shelter and settlements programming throughout the program cycle within that context. And so the analysis of the field research, we're hoping that it will provide some really good recommendations on how to improve field practices in relation to that mainstreaming inclusion. In addition to that, what we're hoping is that through the gathering of data, that consultants will sort of build more awareness. We'll be able to share tools such as All Under One Roof, and we'll talk a bit more about that, but also to provide sort of technical support to the sector, to the sectors in relation to the topic. On this particular topic, we have completed, well, the consultants have completed an inspection report, but due to COVID restrictions, we've had a bit of a halt in this work, and unfortunately, the original consultant team won't be able to continue. So we'll be sharing this information with the field team and partners very soon, but I'm only mentioning it today just because we'll soon be needing another consultant team, which hopefully includes a shelter expert and a disability inclusion expert, in case anyone on the call today is interested in this kind of work going forward. So we'll put that out through the networks of the working group very soon as well, but do get in touch if you're interested. Along with the investigations, we've also contributed to developing research proposals, which is linked to the roadmap for research. There's a little bit on this slide talking about it, but because the launch of the roadmap for research is tomorrow, I'm not going to talk much more about that. We'll wait till you can read about it in the publication. So next slide, please, Pablo. Just quickly, one thing that we're proud to contribute to this year is a small opinion piece in the recently released Shelter Compendium. So this was specifically around inclusive and accessible IEC materials. So it was really looking at the importance of recognizing that access to information is a right for all, and really highlighting the need to consider that it's not just about making our messages technically clear, but how we can make them accessible and inclusive to all people. And what accessible information means is really different to different people. It might be, for some people, it might be large print or readout format. Others, it might be information translated into their first language. It might just be accessibility of the location where information is being disseminated. So there's a lot of things to consider when we're thinking about inclusive and accessible information and education materials. So on this slide, there's just a few key tips from that piece. But I'd really encourage everyone to take some time to go to iec.sheltercluster.org to read both this opinion piece and also other articles in the compendium, because I think it's really it's a really great compendium, but also to look at the sort of broader implications of inclusion and how we can be more inclusive in our messaging. So we're really happy to be part of that. Next one, Pablo. The other thing that I sort of touched on at the start is around the review and updating of inclusive guidance within the sector. And with the support of the USAID BHA grant, which I'm sure many people are aware of, we're currently undertaking a rapid review and update of the All Under One Roof guidelines. So just to make sure that they can be more effective and support more inclusive programming and just be useful to you in whatever context that you're working in. So in case you haven't seen it before, I've just put a few pages on this slide which show different parts of the actual guidelines, because the guidelines are a really comprehensive kind of guidance material, and it does look at including persons with disabilities at every phase from preparedness to recovery. It has a section providing technical guidance for shelter and settlements plans, and it also emphasises participation by and equal opportunities for persons with disabilities. So it's got these three main sections, which is inclusion in phases of disaster management, technical guidance for shelter and settlements, and then promoting participation and equal opportunities. And on the slide, you can actually see that it also includes a number of checklists that can be really helpful in ensuring that you've covered everything off at each stage, basically. So I'm sharing this because we're basically going to be doing a number of consultations to understand how the guidelines are being used and what we can do to strengthen them. Because again, like I said, we want these to be as useful and practical and I guess relevant to your work. So we're really trying to get feedback from people, especially those people who have used them. So if you have knowledge of the guidelines, I apologize for my cat. Sorry, everyone. Yes, I'm just about to give you the link here. So if you have any, oh, you've got this? Thank you very much. Thank you, Hannah. Yeah. Thanks for putting that link in. Yeah, if you've got knowledge of the guidelines, we'd really encourage you to complete the survey at that link. And then if you can even get in touch with us as well if that link is not working, but that hopefully should work. Okay, thanks, Pablo. Next slide. Oh, God, I'm really sorry. Okay, basically we just really like to encourage everyone to get in touch with the working group. The other way is that if you can follow the working group page on the Global Shelter Cluster website, I think we'll be talking about it in other working groups and communities of practice as well. But if you go to the actual page of the working group on the website, you can follow, and then you can stay updated when we share documents, share meetings, that kind of information, and so that you can learn a bit more about the inclusion in shelter and settlements, but also if you're just interested in staying involved or sharing case studies or contributing in any way to any of the work that we're doing, that would be really great. I'm going to start because the cat is getting in my way. But I did want to have just a small moment to be able to ask any questions, because I think I've got 3 minutes left. So if anyone's got any questions for the working group or would like to reach out to us, I'd love you to do that now. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. I think
there's a hand.
Ella, there is a hand up.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi, Leanne, and hi, Widget. I just wanted to ask a question about maybe inclusion of the psychosocial disability in the revision. If there's going to be any possibility, and we can further make the linkages with the health discussions that we have been having.
Yes, and thanks so much for that question, Ella. That's a really, really good point, and particularly relevant given the shelter and mental health event that was held recently. We are really keen to make sure that the updated guidelines do have a bit wider sort of provisions within it. At the moment, the guidelines are pretty much focused on physical and sensory disabilities, and we really want to be able to make sure that we can look beyond that and really understand how cognitive disabilities may also interact with shelter programming, and how we can be more inclusive more generally and wider than the current guidelines allow. Yeah.
Thanks, Leanne. There's another question from Nikki. Quick question and quick answer, please.
Yes.
Thanks for the update. Just a very quick question. I may have missed it. Is there a time frame planned for some of the updating of guidance and things like that?
Oh, great question. Thank you, Nikki. Yes, I should have put that on the slide. We have the slide, the survey that we've got at the moment, which is the general slide, is just out until the 11th of June. So it's only a few days, but if you get in touch with us and you need a bit extra time, that's all fine. But the broader update of the guidelines, we need to have the content finalized by the end of August. So we'll make sure that all of the consultations are done late June, early July, and then we'll be continuing to do different rounds and maybe key informant interviews throughout July, and then the update will happen throughout August.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leanne. Thanks. We will move on to the next presentation. Please feel free to post questions on the chat as well, and Leanne can answer them as we go along. But for now, I will hand over to Olivier, I think, from the Promoting Safer Building Working Group.
Yes.
Thank you, Olivier. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello to everybody, and thanks to be part of this webinar. So the working group Safe Recovery is moderated by CARE International and Crater. Main objective of the working group is understanding the recovery process, looking at technical best practice that can benefit to affected population in order to build back better and safer. And then, thanks for this, looking at what can be done before and after a crisis, mainly to support the self-recovery process, people who are self-recovering by themselves. Next slide, please. So this year, thanks to GCRF grant, we were able to develop a different activity with many other partners, such as SANDEP, Habitat for Humanity, Catholic Relief Service, and the Federation, and also BGS. We carry on to work on our previous work, that is to say the protocol that we developed already 2 years ago in order to support organization to develop answer after a disaster. So this protocol is 8 steps from forming the working group, understanding the context, define IC material, identifying stakeholder and audience, etc. So thanks to a case study in Malawi, all of us were able to develop or to improve on method and tools that we already think about last year, and so we already came to good result. I will introduce to you this result. Next slide, please. So step one of the protocol is understanding the context. Now I think you are used of this. One of the activities to develop a shelter response profile. So we develop one more for Malawi, involving as best as possible the local actor. So for this we support, we moderate a tweak, but Cecilia Schmorzer is moderating for Malawi. So today the collection of shelter response profile include 8 documents. There is a link where you can access to them. In 2020, Crater Lab was able to carry out an impact study of the previous and existing shelter response profile. We will make available the result very soon. And for the years to come, from 2020 to 2022, thanks to a BHA grant through the Global Shelter Cluster, we will be able to develop 2 more shelter response profile. As soon as we will get the fund, you will be invited to contact us to see where this shelter response profile will be the more appropriate or useful, and so we'll work with you in 2 more countries to develop such tools. Next slide. Yes. Again, regarding step 1, understanding the context, we carry on to develop method and tools in order to help organization on site to handle a good comprehension of what is existing, what are the local dynamic in terms of construction purpose, what are the actors, who is doing what, and what are the characteristics of the local building practice. It was developed in the previous years mainly for a rural area. This year, thanks to a project with Caritas Nepal and with Fondation Abbé Pierre in Madagascar, we were able to improve on it as to develop it for urban area. Sonia Molina is working on a CAP analysis that helped to go faster to some of the issues that came out from the diagnosis, local diagnosis. And again, thanks for the same grant that I already mentioned, in partnership with Caritas Bangladesh and Catholic Relief Service, we will be able to develop a tutorial, online tutorial, as our organization that want to use it to be supported in doing it. Next slide. To support step 2 to step 5 of the protocol, different tools are under development right now. Cecilia, with the twig in Malawi, is working on a tool in order to help to decide what type of material can be relevant in one specific context regarding to impact on environmental impact, social impact, cultural impact, and so on. And with the BHA grant, we will be able to work on it also with CARE International and CARE Malawi and us to make something more comprehensive for supporting organizations interested on this. We worked, or IOM worked with us in this project in Malawi and wider with the Shelter Compendium, and we will have a meeting, a specific meeting on Thursday, June 17, from 1 to 1:45 p.m. That will focus on this, so we'll not go longer on that right now. Next slide, and I think I will hand over to Bill Flynn. Next slide. Yes, Bill, can you take the lead?
Sure. Thanks very much, Olivier. It's great to be here with everybody again. Every year since the foundation of the working group, which a few years back now, we've held working group meetings, workshops, roughly speaking, on twice a year. And over the last year, these have been concentrated really on the production of guidance for self-recovery. So we had a workshop in April on context analysis. We had another on implementation in September. And in January of this year, we had one on MEAL, on monitoring and evaluation. The reports from all of these workshops are on the cluster website, on our webpage there. So please have a look at them. If anyone is interested in joining them in the future, then please just get in touch with myself or Olivier or anyone else in the team. On this slide also is the Shelter and Geoscience workshop. I think the link for this is not on the website, so we can perhaps pop the link into the chat afterwards. This is in collaboration with the British Geological Survey, who is a partner on our current funding, research funding, which runs from now until September. Again, BGS are very interested in any kind of collaboration. So if people are interested, then please feel free to get in touch. Next slide, please. Since we had the first Shelter and Health Learning Day that was May 2020, we've published a report called Towards Healthier Homes in Humanitarian Setting. And we've been following up. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thanks. So we've been following up on the findings and recommendations from that report. And Sue Webb and Emma Weinstein-Sheffield, amongst a bunch of co-authors, there were quite a few co-authors on this chapter, have written a chapter for the Roadmap for Research, which is due to be launched, I think, tomorrow, is it? Next slide. Another follow-up, which was just very recent, was we did 2 half days on shelter and mental health, which Leanne mentioned. Now, I won't go in more detail on this because, again, if we go to the next slide, I would like to encourage people to join the thematic session that we're running tomorrow at 12 o'clock Geneva time, 12 o'clock Geneva time. There's a thematic session on shelter and health, which will be covering the issues of health and mental health and well-being. And we've got a great lineup of panelists for that day. So please come and join us if you possibly can. Next and final slide. Now, I'm not going to go through all of this in detail. I assume it's being recorded, so you'll be able to look at it afterwards. But this is just some of the areas of research that we've been involved in that either myself or Olivier haven't yet mentioned. So I won't go through them all, but they broadly, the sort of areas of that we've been looking at have, well, health is a big one and comes sort of into the category of wider impacts, where we've also been looking at livelihoods and the home and community sort of surging interest, I think, in the issue of home and community work that we've been doing with NRC and CRS. I should say that not all of these are strictly, working group outputs. They all are part of the working group. They all connect with the working group. But we are lucky to have, a funding and a number of partners, all of whom are sort of working together on this in a sort of very collaborative process. So I think next slide, but I think that's it. If anyone's got any questions, I think we do have a couple of minutes left.
Yes, thank you, Olivier. Thank you, Bill. We have a couple of minutes left in case anyone wants to pose any questions now. Feel free to speak up or post them on the chat as well. Links to many of the resources that have been mentioned have been posted here in the chat. And obviously, you're also welcome to send questions later on to the working group chairs. Kera and Crater, in the website, you'll find their email addresses. Are there any questions or comments? Anyone who's doing work in relation to anything that has been presented today? Okay, then we will move on to the next presentation. I think it's the non-food items community of practice. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Olivier. A reminder to everyone about the shelter and health session tomorrow that Bill mentioned. And moving on, Renee, could you please provide us with a quick update about the NFI Community of Practice?
Indeed, I can. Can we go to the next slide? Yes, hi. Hello, everybody. So yes, the non-food items working group, which was traditionally known as the NFI Best Practices Working Group up until a couple months ago. So we have been having some very interesting meetings over the last year, I would say. So basically, the working group has, for those of you who may not be familiar, it started back in 2016. And it had 2 workshops, one in the Africa region and then one in the Asia region. And after those workshops, it was decided that new global guidance on NFIs was not really the gap. It was more about having more contextualized information in order to be able to make decisions rapidly and in a quality manner when distributing NFIs at the country level. So last year in 2020, before the pandemic, we did a survey of what might be the topics to include in a training curriculum. Alas, the training curriculum, it was never funded. But then we've had different actors, contributing from their best practices. So as conversations evolved in our quarterly meetings, we started to have some interesting sessions on energy, particularly in the area of winterization response and also in the area of cooking energy. So this year in 2021, we took a survey in order to make the work plan, but we decided that also the manner in which the NFI working group was working was less as a working group because we didn't have enough people providing resources to develop tools, and a lot of the tools that we were discussing are being developed at country level. So our role is to continue to have probably quarterly meetings, but then also discussions online through the NFI working group page. So I would invite you to subscribe so that you can get the different updates about the NFI working group. Neil and I are going to speak through at the end of this meeting today how the communities of practice are actually working, so that you can get a bit of an idea of how you can engage in the conversation. But related with a number of other global shelter cluster grants, these topics of energy, environmental approaches, modalities and approaches of NFI distributions, including through cash and analysis of markets, pipelines, these all relate with some of the themes that we're looking at, particularly in our new funding from ECHO in terms of greening the response. As you can see, the top choice for the working plan for the work plan for 2020 was about defining NFI kits, new packages. We've seen this theme in the NFI working group for the past several years in terms of contextualization. And I think COVID-19 also highlighted that gap in terms of NFI distributions in the field, because it was not easy to procure items for a good quarter of 2020 due to the limitation on flights, the overt difficulties it was to get supplies moving. The environmental impact of NFIs is something that we've discussed. So in our last meeting, we were hearing about the Sustainable Packaging Initiative. As you know, the Global Shelter Cluster has a statement about reducing unessential plastics in shelter distributions, and NFIs tends to be a primary culprit of that. Also, there's a continued request for needs monitoring of NFIs. This relates also to global discussions about how do we define needs in the shelter sector, but also in terms of the essential household items and their functional use. Then energy indicators was another big topic that we've discussed. So we had a discussion earlier in the first quarter with colleagues from IOM who are working on some energy indicators, and that also generated some interesting discussions. Then we are also discussing currently with the logistics cluster about classification of NFIs. So this is also helping in procurement and also that functional use package, and then how we actually define contextualized packages. And then lastly, of course, this element of greening the response. So while the NFI working group will cease to exist as a working group per se, the discussions remain pretty much essential. And I think we see in our quarterly meetings, we still see between 40 to 60 participants each time. And then also through this kind of working from home environment, we've been able to also share the recordings of the sessions to a wider group of audience. So even though we phase into a different modality of sharing best practices on NFIs, it is still playing a vital role in the conversation and still serves to create mini groups that can work on some issues. So working in a much more lean fashion than before. Next slide. Yes. So go to the Shelter Cluster Working Group NFI Practices page. Hit subscribe if you're a member of the website, and join the conversation, or also just page through the number of resources that we've collected in different meetings. Also, if you're interested in those topics that I mentioned today, you can see the recordings from our previous meetings readily available at the top of the webpage in terms of those recent meetings. So I would highly encourage you to come and join the conversation there. So I will not take much further time, and Angel has just Angel and Cecilia have kindly posted the link there, so please do not miss it. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Renee. Are there any questions from anyone on the non-food item community of practice? No questions. All right, so thank you very much. We can move on to the next presentation. This is from the Diaspora Engagement Working Group. Let me see if I can move on to the next slide. I don't know if
I think I saw Roberta.
Roberta is gonna, or Xavier, you know, is going to do the presentation. Okay, Xavier, then over to you.
Yeah. Roberta, are you here?
Xavier, is Roberta going to present, or are you going to present?
I see that she joined the call, but I could start and she could jump on if needed. So a little bit of background on the Diaspora Engagement Working Group. So basically it has been set up in September 2019 after a retreat of the SAG. The membership is quite various from group of organization from diaspora and humanitarian partners. It's facilitated by IOM and basically three output oriented. As you see, the main objective is to define SOP, standard operating procedures, to increase coordination between shelter actors and diaspora actors. And the idea is to develop SOPs who are relevant for the global level, meaning that they could be applied to any context with more, let's say, natural disaster, but it will be also piloted in Philippines and maybe other contexts too. So basically take the SOPs to apply to a context to see if they are relevant for this context and also globally. The SOPs have been drafted a few months ago, and we are revisiting. So basically I'm working on this project and supporting the working group from a few weeks and for a few weeks to come, and basically is to finalize the SOPs around August this year. So basically I'm going to tell you what we did so far and why we have a meeting scheduled on 24th of June. Next slide, please.
Xavier,
Roberta, go ahead.
Sorry, my computer was down for a few minutes. Yes, thank you so much for starting. So, and good afternoon, everybody. So what I was here, we have done some work over the past year, which is very much in line with the work that we started in September 2019 under the Global Shelter Cluster on creating the SOPs. This work is aimed at developing and piloting a framework for diaspora's engagement in humanitarian assistance, and is a cross-sector, so it's not specific to a cluster or a sector. The idea is very much similar to the SOP's rationale, which is to create a more streamlined and more streamlined and predictable way in which diaspora actors and other humanitarian actors can interface with one another. And we have conducted a number of consultations, surveys, and working group over the last few months in order to ensure that the product that we are proposing really makes sense for all the actors that are supposed to use it. And so we have held a working group, 6 meetings of a working group that was mixed of diaspora leader and organizations representatives on one hand, and also UN and INGOs representatives, and some cluster leads, including IFRC. So thank you, colleagues, for joining us in this effort. So what are we proposing as a result of this work are two deliverables. One is a model for internal diaspora coordination, and you can see here on the right side, it's our draft model for internal diaspora coordination. We are working on finalizing it, and then we will present it. The premise is that, of course, for a more effective interface between diaspora organizations on one hand and other humanitarian actors, it's important for diaspora organizations to be internally more coordinated and organized. And so that when the interface takes place and the coordination takes place, the organizations that are being consulted, they don't represent only themselves, but the larger constituencies, and they also have the power to trickle down some information to small and medium diaspora organizations that are active on the ground. And then on the other hand, we are proposing a model for diaspora external coordination, so coordination with other institutional humanitarian actors. And this is on the draft, and we hope to present it to the larger community between August and September. So it's written here, the drafted SOPs for the global shelter clusters are currently being revisited to reflect on and align with this process, to be sure that what makes sense for the shelter cluster can also be replicated for other clusters in the future. To you, Xavier.
Next slide, Pablo. So basically, what we are working on now on preparation of the next meeting will be on 24 June, is to revisit the SOPs who have been drafted before the process that Roberto described, and basically to see if you are a diaspora organization who wants to be engaged in shelter sector, and for the shelter sector to engage with diaspora organization, because I mean, as we all recognize, diaspora is an amazing actor, non-recognized or non-usual actors that we recognize, but they bring a lot of knowledge, a lot of capacities and opportunities. So basically, in the SOPs, it was identified that we need to have some workflow. So basically the to-do list of the SOPs. So we are working on these drafts that we will present and discuss during next meetings. So basically at the moment we are working on a document will be part of the SOPs, but could work also as an independent document for preparedness and for response. So basically looking at response and preparedness, looking at roadmap for coordination, key processes and activities, and for both sides of the coin, I would say, diaspora organization and key stakeholders. Next slide, Pablo, please. So this is a zoom on the draft. So basically, how this is organized is to say, if I'm a diaspora organization or I'm a cluster coordination team or I'm with partners, we identify from the SOPs and extend it from what we discussed in the other working group, what are the key actions that could, must put in motion. Looking at objective setting for a diaspora organization to engage the shelter sector. What are the objectives? But also what is expected from other actors, shelter cluster team, global and country level, humanitarian partners, donors, to contribute to. So it's looking the dimension to be really pragmatic, to be result oriented, to be really a checklist of the to-do list. And you see there is different objectives. So at the moment, the two workflow are drafted. Next slide, please, Pablo. And so on 24th of June, we are going to send the invitation in coming days to the current members of the working group. But everybody who is really interested to join the discussion is welcome. So please send an email to Roberta or I if you're interested to be part of this process. So basically, Roberta will present more in detail what we show you on the graph. What exactly is this framework for diaspora engagement for partners to better understand what was discussed and what are the trends who come from that, and to see where is the connection with what the shelter cluster working group is connecting with. We will present in detail these two workflow. We are still waiting for some preliminary feedback, and we will do some group discussion on looking at this, this workflow, the SOPs, and also starting to speak on piloting of this process. And we do group discussion to have the collective look at this, collective being diaspora organization, cluster people, coordination people, and humanitarian partners and donors. And so I think everybody is welcome. I think this is a huge opportunity to really mainstream and strengthen this dynamic. And I'm pretty sure that we all agree that for disaster preparedness and response, there's a lot of opportunity to engage in depth with that. So that's it for mine. Roberta, do you want to have a closing note? So we go to question and answer.
No, this was great. Thank you, Xavier. We appreciate very much the presentation. I think some of you were already member of the working group, so thank you so far for the contribution. We had a few months in which the work was put on hold a bit last year, but I think we are ready to, we are resuming it. We're ready to finalize in the next few months, and there is a lot of appetite and interest from different actors to see really how diasporas can help shelter actors to fill some gaps, to maximize our efforts, to increase communities' resilience. And there is also a lot of interest from the diaspora as well. So I think the timing is ripe, and the shelter cluster can actually also pave the way for other clusters to learn how to do it in a more streamlined and a predictable way. So please join us, and thank you, Xavier, for your work. And we can take some few questions if you have.
I would add also that Roberta mentioned it, but you saw the working group. You look at the global picture, the big picture, all dimension, and the shelter cluster is the first sector who is engaging this process, and I think that's really a great news. And I think the SOPs we are developing and all the workflow is for the shelter cluster, is for any context, but I think there's a huge opportunity also for the shelter cluster to support other cluster to join the train. So I think it's a good opportunity we could all contribute to. Over.
Thank you, Xavier, and thank you, Roberta. Anyone has any comments? I do have one question, Roberta. If you can elaborate a little bit on this agreement you are negotiating with Facebook and your social media or communication dissemination activities you're planning with the additional funding from BHA?
Yes, we'd love to talk about that. So this is because the initiation of this process on SOPs was triggered within the life of a project that was being funded by BHA for over the last 3 years on engaging diasporas for promoting safer shelters. And the project has, apart from this piece, which is more in terms of coordination among key actors, there is the core component of the project is around communication awareness raising. The idea is that increasing diaspora's knowledge and awareness on safer practices, that we could reach indirectly the objective of increasing affected communities' understanding of the practices and also potentially use of those practices in their process of self-rebuilding and self-reliance. So we are exploring a number of communication approaches. And we are now in the process of finalizing an agreement with Facebook, which would allow us to promote a campaign on safer shelters. This would happen around September. And Facebook would provide a very detailed monitoring and evaluation process of the impact of the campaign. So, and this is a part of an initiative that they've already used with other UN agencies in the past, especially UNICEF around education, and it's data for good. So we will design the campaign, but they will help us start setting up a number of criteria and indicators to monitor whether the campaign has been effective to the scopes that were foreseen. So we will use their analytics. And it's they will do it pro bono because of the social dimension and social objective of the campaign. So if we would reach out back to you as shelter experts to be sure that we are maximizing this opportunity and ensuring that the campaign makes sense. So the campaign is directly to the diaspora, but we also include some indicators of knowledge transfer between diasporas and their communities back home.
Excellent. Lots of exciting activities coming up and a lot of pioneering, both in terms of engaging diasporas, but also in terms of using social media and new technologies for campaigning. I think there are a lot of links here with the Promoting Safer Building or Self-Recovery Working Group and the IEC material and the promotion safer building.
Yes. In fact, I want to say we are working closely with our colleagues in HQ and taking advantage of all the work they have done in filtering and vetting all the IC material and creating. So using that, we are also using that material to test it with the diaspora and then provide feedback on the clarity, the cultural appropriateness of the material, and try to use the diaspora also as a non-institutional actor that is able still to eventually to utilize this material.
Great, fantastic. We are reaching out to other actors that have a lot of impact as well. And also links with the Disability Inclusion Working Group in that messaging, of course. Are there any other comments, questions? Otherwise, we will move on to the next presentation. Okay, thank you very much, Roberta. Thank you, Xavier.
Thank you, colleagues, for the opportunity.
You're welcome. I think the next one is the Environment Community of Practice. This is just a placeholder for me to remember what the order is. I don't know if Kelly is in the call and if he's going to present. Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you,
and
Kelly.
What I'm going to do is I'm just going to send everybody some files and in the link in a minute here, and we won't have a slide just to do that. I hope some files have been shared. I hope. So what you should be getting. Yeah. So what you should be getting is a file which you can open up and look at. Sorry, I have to figure out where the heck I am right now. you should be getting a file that you can open up and look at. It's sort of the introductory for the presentation today. And that file just outlines the sort of objectives of the ECOP, which is the Environment Community of Practice. It's a relatively small group, but we're willing to grow. We've focused mostly on providing a mechanism within the cluster, a help desk type function, so that when people have questions about environmental issues, they can come to us and we can help them out. We've been doing that for a number of years now. Also, something we've done with WWF US is produce a number of reports on environmental issues related to specific disasters. The most recent one was on the St. Vincent volcano eruption, which I know wasn't a big shelter issue, but we were involved with United Nations Environment Program and others on that. But also some of the recent cyclones and hurricanes and things like that. So we produce these reports. Frankly, some of them have gotten to be fairly familiar because we keep seeing the same disasters over and over again. I don't see why we can't access those. Anyway, we'll follow up on that in a minute. So the other thing that, and also we provide support in research and doing other kinds of things within the project. Within the ECOP, I'm sorry, so specific projects. And so we sort of function like a community practice, but also we function sometimes like, like a working group. I'm sorry you can't access those files. We'll follow up with them after the presentation. A couple of things that we've done also recently is a matrix on humanitarian and environmental activities. And that's something I can also share if you have my email address or to send me a question. One of the issues that we found at the help desk is that there are a lot of different projects, over 20 other projects that are going on related to the environment. And so we put together a matrix to help people within the shelter sector and others to understand where they can go for resources. For instance, there's a tremendous amount on energy. It's as if that's a whole separate world out there. And so when somebody sends us an email and says, well, what kind of solar lights can we get? Well, there is already all that information that you need to know there someplace else. So it's this help desk function that we've really focused on. The second thing that, or rather the third thing that we've really been focusing on is the SMAC. So that's a shelter material assessment of carbon. We also call it the life cycle analysis of shelter. And this is something we've been working on with BRE and WWF, and there'll be a presentation on them on Thursday. And this is an idea of developing a very simple tool based on some existing software developed by BRE that will allow you to pick specific shelter type materials like wood or cement or other kinds of things. And then based on a bill of quantities, you can then look at the CO2 equivalent impact of your design of a building. You can compare 3 different designs. I won't go into it in a lot more detail because it's going to be a session on Thursday. But one of the values here is that it adds another dimension into the decision-making process. And it also helps those organizations that are interested about the CO2 imprint or the carbon input of their efforts and trying to look at different options. It's not the only thing you need to use to make a decision. And it's not the only tool that's out there. And there's a lot of other work going on in this area, which needs to be coordinated. So that's something else that we've been working on. We also have a chapter in the R4R book, and there'll be a session on that tomorrow, as other people have mentioned. Good, so that's an update on the ECOP. And we'll figure out how to get the files to you. I thought I was going to be really smart and just send you the files and avoid having somebody to click through the things, but that didn't work out. Lesson for next time. So essentially, as the co-chair, I am the co-chair with Anita Van Breda from WWF. We're looking for new ideas of things that the ECOP can focus on. Obviously, with the ECHO grant, which has been mentioned several times, there will be things that are of interest to members of the ECOP, and we're still waiting, I gather, at the beginning of next month on the guidance about how to access those funds and what kinds of ideas could be put forward for that. But we hope the ECOP can have an active role in that as well. But I'm open for questions, hopefully provide answers. And any new ideas for what the ECOP can focus on, or any way we can improve our interface with the shelter sector, I welcome any suggestions. Thanks.
Thank you, Kelly. Any questions, any comments right now? There is a hand up, please go ahead.
Hi, Kelly. This is Liz Palmer speaking from Save the Children. It's nice to see you again. And thank you so much for the presentation. One of the things that we've come up against, and I know you've developed some guidance for this, but I'm curious to know, it was quite a while ago, if there has been any update, is around the rapid environmental impact assessments. And in fact, more recently, the greater growing interest from donors with regards to what they call the environmental monitoring and mitigation plans and the social mitigation impact plans. And if the Environment Community of Practice has developed any kind of mapping of what's coming out of the different donors. And we found that very, very strict and very heavy requirements are being put onto partners. But what we found is that we're woefully underprepared, I should say, for the amount of work that comes with those conditions. And if that's something that the Environment Community of Practice has started to track and map, examples and tools, guidance that we could probably fall back on for that sort of work. Thank you. Over.
We'll put that on the to-do list. This is an issue that's come up.
That's great.
Actually, I don't mean that as a joke. We have this matrix that I'll send you a copy, or I can forward a copy. We have this matrix of all these different projects. What we found is that there's a tremendous overlap. For instance, the United Nations Environment Program is developing a virtual environmental assistance or environmental advisor tool, including the shelter sector. Some of you may have already seen that. Others are talking about doing a similar kind of thing. Northwestern University in the United States is looking at something similar. Penn State is also looking at something kind of along those lines. In terms of the guidance on environmental rules and regulations, I have been talking a bit with the International Association of Impact Assessment about that issue, but what we find is that the donors are all kind of different, and the way they apply the rules are different. So we have USAID on one side, which has very explicit rules, but get very strict, from go for very loose to very strict, and other organizations, it's sort of all out there. The Canadians and Australians tend to be relatively more strict than some of the others. And so this is one of the issues we probably want to explore a little bit more to clarify all those different issues. In addition, you have the NEAT Plus, which if you're not familiar, send me an email on that, which has a shelter module in it. So you'd use it, but it's only applicable once you've already started a project. You can't really use it for the design process or things like that. And then you have organizations like the World Bank, ADB, that have what they call safeguards, where they've started to change the name a little bit now, but it's a different type of approach with the environmental management plans and things like that. So we had tried to do a little bit of scoping on that earlier, and there was some effort by the Joint Environment Unit to put together an overview. And so I'll go back and look at that stuff again, and then come back to the ECOP with some more details. We see, by the way, we also see the same kind of thing happening with the CO2, the carbon footprint, or the CO2 equivalent issue, where different organizations are setting different standards, the green and the blue, for instance, or the green and the orange. And some organizations are saying they're going to be net zero and things like that, but we really don't know what that really means in practice, and how to measure those kinds of things. And this also relates to something that comes out of the SMAC tool. Once you've identified your CO2 equivalent, the question is, can you offset it? And then once you start offsetting it, then the question raised, well, is the company or is the outfit offsetting it reliable, and other things like that. So it's quite an expanding area in terms of certification, verification, and things like that. So I'll put that on my list to do.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other comments? I think, Kelly, the momentum has never been greater in terms of pushing the environment agenda than it is today. I remember you from the very beginning of the cluster approach, coming to our meetings with Anita and pushing the environment agenda year after year, sometimes without having enough response. And I think the tide has changed, and now there is a lot of interest and a lot of momentum. So we should certainly keep on riding the wave. And well, thank you very much for the support you have given to the Global Seattle cluster on your own time, actually.
Well, it's not only me. I mean, there are a lot of other people involved. I'm just the public face.
Of course. But thank you very much. Any other comments, questions before we move to the next? No. All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Angel has posted the link to the Community of Practice page of the website in the chat. So feel free to check the contact details there. And then we will move on to the Information Management Community of Practice. Neil, over to you.
Hi, everyone. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Neil Bowman. I'm one of the leads for the IAM Community of Practice, along with Renee, who you saw earlier. Just as a, I guess to kick this off, sorry, my son's printing in the background. We have made some structural changes to the way communities of practice and some of the working groups are working. We've added some features into the website that will. Sorry? Is that you, Pablo?
Somebody needs to mute.
No, go ahead. There was somebody who unmuted by mistake. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry. In the past, communities of practice and some of the working groups were managed using an external service, Google Groups, which had its challenges, I guess. But what we have done is integrated some of the features of Google Groups into the website, so we can allow for the exchange of information to get tracked on the website and make it searchable. So this community of practice is intended to be for, information management practitioners to exchange information, and for those of you who require assistance for information management support, this would be a venue for you to come to us. So I would encourage you to, if you're an information manager, to subscribe or follow this website, and you can be part of those conversations. Or if you want to use the services of the community, feel free to reach out to us through here. Next slide, please. So the types of things that we can support you with, one is obviously, leading you through some of the features and tools that the website enables, but also any other issues around IAM at field level. So, data collection issues or using of mobile tools for how to collect that information. 5W, which tends to be a perpetual problem for most field clusters. Assessments, we have members of the community from REACH and other people who have strong expertise in assessment methodologies. And the ability for us to reach out to the community if there are any employment opportunities. So I guess our old iteration of the community had well over 100 people. So if there was a job posting, there's a pretty good source of people who could fill that support. Next slide, please. So we've made some adjustments to the website, as I suggested, and a key part of that is how we use the website as a communication tool. So when you subscribe to a group, whether it's a response or a working group, you can get notifications to your inbox, your email, and then we've also connected it to the mobile app if you'd like to get alerts on your phone. The website also supports Kobo-like data collection forms, and we're making continued adjustments to that to make it more and more compatible with external tools, so that we're not all reinventing the wheel on this. Also, the back end of the website has been significantly changed and continues to do so, just by allowing the content to be more searchable, sortable, and discoverable on the website. Next slide, please. A big effort that we have underway at the moment, without going into too many technical details, the website and the platform is built upon a technology that has been around for a little while, and there's been some major security improvements and usability improvements to the technology. So we are in the process of simply moving it from one version to the next, which is more work than it seems. So it's an effort that's been going on for about 6 months and will probably continue for another 3, 4, or 5 months, depending on funding sources that we can get. We expect to launch the new website hopefully in the summer. I'm hopeful by the summer, but again, it depends on a few things. But this upgrade in the technology will make the site more usable from field level. It'll make it more secure, and it'll have more things that we can sort of leverage to support you with. Also, we've been working with, I guess, a number of the other working groups as well to give more content. I guess the most major one is our work with the IEC compendium over the last, I guess, probably 6 months or more even. So the IEC compendium, for those of you who aren't aware of it, it sits at iec.sheltercluster.org and is a repository of IEC materials that has been vetted by shelter practitioners. We're doing some more development on that to better integrate it with the root of the website. We are implementing a learning center on top of it all, so that will be at learn.sheltercluster.org, where online training materials and other resources can be put. Things like more than just a roof, we hope will be hosted there using a learning management system. And then finally, we're working on improving things like events, for one, are one of the biggest challenges on the website. So we're upgrading that so that we can have, for a field level response, we can have a calendar that people can subscribe to. So if meetings are being added, it will get automatically added to subscribed users' inboxes or to their Outlook. Next slide, please. We continue to work on the mobile application. For the time being, this application is intended to allow the users of the app to have mobile access to certain documents, but also, again, data collection tools. We can start leveraging field data collection and have that information readily available through the website. So the website and the mobile application are fundamentally tied together. So they're almost the same thing, but just one's a portable version of the other. And again, that's available on the App Store and Google Play. And will continue to change as part of this migration effort that we're currently doing. Is there another slide? I think that might be it. Oh, right. And just to reiterate that we're here to support not only just the field level with information management support, but also the working groups. We're slowly rolling out some of these new features to some of the other working groups, things like the subscriptions and the discussion groups. So that's the ability for us to communicate by email, but also have that recorded on the website so it's searchable. And we've had off and on communication with some of the other working groups and how we can support them. That's kind of it from my side. Renee, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, just to iterate on that last point, for the way that the website has started to improve, so it implies a little bit of a behavioral change for those of you who have known the Shelter Cluster website in the previous years, because now you can all have your own account and you can all subscribe to the groups that you want. And then through that, you'll be able to send, as Neil was just saying, and we'll speak more about this in the cash session tomorrow, but you'll be able to send emails to the website and then also get updates on discussions on those. So there's discussion fora, there's news features. So if you're subscribed to those websites, you'll receive updates from the website directly to your email. And then also that integrates well with a lot of the app features if you have the Shelter Cluster app downloaded on your mobile device. To learn more about that, you can check out also the NFI working group page, as I mentioned earlier, because we used quite a number of those features in this past year or two. And then also to the Shelter Cash and Markets Community of Practice, but we'll be continuing to roll out those further in the other communities of practice and working groups. And we're also starting to use them for a number of country level clusters, which is extremely helpful.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Renee, for that update. Are there any questions or comments from people in the call on the information management community of practice or the planned changes to the website and the app and the communities of practice? It's actually quite cool, the new functionalities of the community of practice. Yes, Javier, please go ahead.
Good afternoon and good morning, Neil. I assume it's morning on your side of the planet. Just a question: as you describe the evolution of the IM part of our business, is this community of practice an help desk or a hub that country cluster could call? I've got an issue and you will find solution. More this, more than to be an internal discussion between IMer, I would say. More to be, help desk or hub to help people who have no capacity, understanding. Can you explain on this?
Yeah, I think you said it all. It's both, right? It allows information management practitioners to exchange information between each other, but also if there is support required from field level or even global level, I think we all have the ability to tap into whatever expertise sits in the community. Is that clear?
Yes, crystal clear.
Yeah, also what's nice about it is that you can, in the discussion, when you post a question, let's say like, oh, I'm doing this type of assessment, I need some guidance, how did you pull it off in such a way, you can see the discussions that others have posted. So it kind of becomes like a permanent wiki page of previous discussions. That way, if you're in the field and you need a more immediate answer, you can see if other frequently asked questions have been addressed. So that's one of the advantages of the discussion chats. But just to say, this past year, it's also been a nice intervention is that we've had a kind of Skype chat as well. And that also was facilitating the way that IMs could exchange quite quickly and easily and talk with one another. So yes. Yes, also notably, we're all wearing red. Good cluster team coordination. Even Pablo made it into the IM memo.
Mine a bit faded. Mine is a bit faded.
Exactly. It's the lighter 127, 2022 of the cluster red, the 153, 67, 69.
Okay, are there any other questions, comments on this working group or on any of the other previous presentations? No more. So, well, feel free to post questions on the chat, but I'm gonna hand over to Miguel to say a few closing words. Miguel, if you could please.
Thank you very much. I guess I have to apologize that I'm not wearing red or brown, but rather blue. Anyway, I wanted to thank you all the presenters for their amazing synthesizing skills. It's very difficult to summarize all the hard work that goes into these working groups and communities of practice in such a short time frame, and they've all done a very good job of summarizing and explaining, so that those of us who didn't participate in all of the working groups have now a much better picture of how things are going. Also, thank you very much to all the participants for participating, for coming to this session. And I wanted to encourage everyone, particularly everyone in general, but particularly country-level cluster coordinators, to engage in the working groups and the communities of practice, to consult their pages. There's a lot of knowledge out there, a lot of practices that have been shared from many country-level clusters, from many operations, and you can find them there. I'm going to actually, as a reminder, share the link that has all the communities of practice and all the working groups, so that we have them handy. Let me see if I manage. Yeah, no, I can't. Okay, I will send it later, or maybe a colleague can do it for me. I encourage you to look at these pages and look and see all the things that can be found there. There's a lot. And also, of course, to encourage, we've seen that many working groups have a close relation with country-level clusters, and this is something that we want to promote. So I would like to encourage country-level cluster coordinators to reach out to the working groups, ask them for support, ask them for advice, share good practices that you may have, share tools and things that you found useful. On one hand, to benefit from that fora that links together practitioners from all over the world, and also to keep it grounded to reality, to make sure that the work of all those enthusiastic shelter practitioners is as linked as possible with the realities on the ground and the needs of country-level clusters, which basically is the objective of the Global Shelter Cluster, to support country-level clusters and make your life easier as cluster coordinators and as shelter practitioners. Maybe just as a short, very short summary of some of the issues or pending actions, or what to look forward from each of the working groups. We've heard from the Disability and Inclusion Working Group a call to contribute to the survey that they are having until the 11th of June. We've also heard from the Self-Recovery Working Group the need to be alert, because very soon they will send an offer for shelter response profiles. So country-level clusters, be alert in case that you don't have already a shelter response profile. As soon as that option is there, please reach out and express your interest to have one of those. They are really comprehensive and very useful. On the NFI Community of Practice, we've heard the call to subscribe to it and receive updates and look at the many resources that they have, very well organized on the page. From the Diaspora Engagement Working Group, I think we are all looking forward to receiving the SOPs and engaging the SOPs on engaging with the diaspora, and we can engage with the working group by joining the 24th of June meeting when these SOPs will be presented. The Environment Community of Practice is chairing this open space session on Thursday at 1 Geneva time, where they will tell us about this SMAC, this tool for measuring the carbon footprint. And also there will be a session on greening the response on Monday 14th from 2 p.m. to 3:30 Geneva time, where we can contribute to giving them ideas to the Environment Community of Practice and to the Global Shelter Cluster in general on how to green the response even more. And then lastly, we heard of the IM Community of Practice about all the new features that we will be having. So I would like to encourage you all to sign up in the website if you still haven't done it. So you will be able to follow responses, follow working groups, and then to be alert of the new features that we will have in the migrated website very soon. So I think this provides a bit of a, maybe not a summary, because there were very rich all these discussions, but more on actions, things that we can be doing regarding these working groups. Next week, tomorrow we will have the second session with the remaining working groups, the Casa Markets, Construction Standards Working Group, Shelter Projects Working Group, the Shelter Vulnerability Classification Working Group, the Settlements Approaches in Urban Areas Working Group. So all these, the remaining working groups will brief us on their plan. And lastly, just to remind ourselves that in 30 minutes, more or less, we will have a session on navigating the Nexus. And then tomorrow, just before the second part of the session, we will have the shelter and health thematic session, very interesting one as well. It will be starting at midday Geneva time. So thanks everyone. I hope you found the session as interesting, as useful as I found it, and looking forward to seeing you. Pablo, anything else from your side?
No, thanks, Miguel. Thanks for closing the session. We'll be seeing many of you in half an hour for the Navigating the Nexus session that Angel has posted in the chat, and nothing else to add. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.